Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with it's Mike Macfadden, right?
That is correct, Mike Macfadden.
It's like the video game, what is that? EA Sports with the NFL. It's
John Madden.
Yeah, John Madden. There you go.
Similar, phonetically similar.
Well, Mike, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? And if you want, what do you do professionally?
Sure. Well, my name is Mike, and professionally, I'm a high school teacher. I teach in a school district north of Chicago. I teach a variety of elective classes, mostly technology and business-based. But for the most part, what I'm here to talk about today is this side project that's sort of unrelated, but we might, through our conversation, find that there are some ties to sort of my real career, the side project of a podcast that I've been working on with some friends called For or Against, that can be found on all major podcasting platforms.
Okay, so what exactly is For or Against?
So For or Against is a podcast. We say that it's a podcast for friends, and it's produced by old friends. So I'm 35, and I would say probably 10 years ago, a group of friends and I sort of worked on a side project. Three of my friends were working on this as sort of like a full-time business. And essentially what it was a content company sort of before a YouTuber was an actual thing. So back in 2010, we were sort of recently out of college, and three of my friends decided to try to create a company that would create original programming for the internet, which at the time, just to put into context, wasn't something that people were doing. I don't even think YouTube at that point had monetized or had a monetization strategy for YouTubers in terms of like profit sharing. And if they did, it was very young. Just to sort of paint the picture of what the world was like then, in 2005, when I was in college, I was featured in Central Illinois' largest newspaper, the Panagraph, just because I had a YouTube channel. And so,
well, it's like it's evolved from people getting hit in the nuts to what it is now, where it's like everybody literally is like putting up videos. Like there's people that review hot sauces. There's people that just go all over the place and all over the map. When it comes to YouTube, you can create a 5-second clip and become famous. TikTok, I called it before it happened. I said it's evil, don't go on to it. And then now they're finding out that China's stealing our information from it. So it's like wonderful. I wonder what's YouTube doing now.
Right. So, but just to sort of put into context, where this podcast that we're working on now came from, we had this show called For or Against. And essentially what we would do is me and a co-host, a guy named John T-Box Thibodeau, who's actually now a writer for Stephen Colbert. We would discuss random topics, and then we would discuss whether or not we were for or against those topics. It was as simple as that. And then in the 2010 days of doing this show, they would probably be about 7 minutes long, thereabouts. And there was a lot of post-production. And so we would film in front of a green screen. And then one of the founders of the company was called Maybe Hip. And so that was sort of like the network. They had like 5 different shows that they were working on, all sort of pop culture, humor, comedy, music related. They would do a whole bunch of post-production where the things that we were talking about would end up sort of behind us on the green screen and sort of like humorous animations. And it took a lot of work to put those videos together. And we did that for about a year. And after about a year's time, it was pretty clear that this wasn't going to necessarily be a project that was going to support 3 people full-time, let alone 5 or 6 people, part-time, that were sort of working on this tangentially. And so we sort of tabled everything related to Maybe Hip and the show For or Against for about 10 years. And then, COVID hit, and my good friends had all moved to, for the most part, different parts of the country. And we found that we weren't really connecting much. We would see each other maybe around Thanksgiving and once or twice, throughout the year. So we decided that we would start a podcast and sort of revamp For or Against and do it in a longer format, where basically we get an opportunity once a week to come together and have like a common project and a goal to work on, which is creating this podcast For or Against, where again, we talk about random topics, mostly pop culture, news items, and decide whether or not we are for or against those topics.
Do you ever get serious topics in there too? Like some controversial type stuff that a lot of people don't talk about between like public school, private school, certain things that go on in the world. I mean, we're talking about pop culture. I mean, it's nice to be fun about it. Like there's a podcast I talked to, which I love the concept of yours. It's a lot. It's like theirs too. It's called Tell Me I'm Wrong. The shout out to them out there. But it's like, it's just friends debating, like, who's the better Spider-Man, who's this. I'm like, that's the fun stuff. I think when it comes to topics, like, me and you could just say, like, what do you prefer? Do you think that, pineapple should go on a pizza? Do you think a pineapple should go on a pizza?
I'm not against anybody that has put a pineapple on a pizza, but it's not my topping of choice. I'm more of like a savory meats topping sort of guy.
See, for me, I don't like the meat toppings. I like the vegetable toppings. So I'm all about that. See,
I'm in favor of vegetable toppings as well. On our show, we generally keep things light. If we talk about serious things, we'll try not to take a strong position in either way. It's sort of like a nonsense debate show. It's the sort of thing that imagine like a chill hang with your friends in your parents' basement when you were in high school. Only now we're all like in our mid 30s and some of us have kids, and just sort of using this as an opportunity to come together and hang out and sort of relive the glory days digitally via Zoom.
well, you got to give me an example of one of the things you guys are talking about.
All right. So, for example, in episode, it was either 1 or 2, we talked about Indiana Jones 5. And so, Indiana Jones, the franchise, the cinematic franchise, is coming out with a 5th movie in the series, and it's going to feature Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, and he's now pushing 80.
Yeah,
So,
I'm against that one for sure. He's going to get hit, and he's going to be turned into dust. I mean, imagine him running away from a rolling ball, and then you break a hip and fall on the floor.
Exactly. So, for or against an octogenarian version of Indiana Jones. So, we'll sort of talk and go into all sorts of depth on just sort of inane topics like that. And another example is I was out for a walk with my dog the other day, and this guy came by, and at first glance it looked like he was on a bicycle, but it wasn't. It was, I found out later, it was the Elliptigo 3C, which is, imagine like a what do you call it, an elliptical machine that you would work out on in the gym. Only it was like actually a mode of transportation. Yeah. And so like, are you for or against the Elliptigo 3C? And then we'll get into all sorts of, tangents on, other alternative modes of transportation that are like bikes, but not quite, like a recumbent bicycle, or like those cross-country skis that have wheels. And so sort of just go on and on and on. And for the most part, we were usually on the same page, but every now and then things get heated. Most recently, the Ford Bronco sort of made a comeback. And if you were alive in the 90s, you were probably familiar with the O.J. Simpson chase that was, famously conducted in a white Ford Bronco. And the release date, the original release date for the revamp of the Ford Bronco was July 9th, which happens to be O.J. Simpson's birthday. And so we had this whole conversation where half of us felt that, this was an intentional plan by Ford to sort of get the, word of mouth PR buzz going.
He made it popular. You got to. It's the man's birthday. Do that for him. Bring back the Ford Bronco.
So that became a very heated, argument about whether or not Ford did that intentionally or not. And so, but again, we keep things light, and if it is a serious topic, obviously, the O.J. Simpson case was very serious for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. But we try to find sort of the inane, sort of silly thing to focus on, and then debate and argue about that. And one thing that we're trying to do, this is something that we never did in the original series back in 2010, 2011, is none of us are experts on most of the topics that we're talking about, but we're trying to actually bring on experts to talk and sort of correct all of the stupid things that we say. We recently talked about adventure racing. Amazon Prime is coming out with a video series called Eco Challenge. It's hosted by Bear Grylls. And it's like a 671 kilometer adventure race where you've got these teams of 3 or 4 that are trying to make it through the land, like in these natural obstacles, rivers, hikes, mountains, cliffs, trees, bushes, all these sorts of things in Fiji. And so it's a race, 671 kilometers. And so we talked about, like, are you for or against an adventure race? Would that be something that you would want to do? And we are working on getting somebody who actually competed in the Eco Challenge. And so we're trying to, actually bring some people on that have some credibility to talk about the things that we sort of blather on about. And then at the same time, we're also trying to figure out how to use this show as a platform for other people that are doing creative things on the internet. So for example, we do a weekend update or a weekly update where everybody talks about, what's been going on since we, last got on the Zoom. And so like, I'm definitely gonna be talking about how, I was on our Instagram and I was reached out to by you, and I'll feature you. And we want to use our platform, albeit a small one, to make greater awareness to other people that are doing cool things online. In 2010, that wasn't going on a lot, but I think podcasting has sort of become a community. And actually, I was listening to a couple episodes of your show, and it seems like you're involved in like the hot sauce community. Is that correct?
I'm involved in so many communities, I don't even think I can count anymore. Mostly hot sauce. Like I have, for instance, I just had a buddy of mine, Harmon. For 8 months, he's been listening to me straight through a podcast ever since I had him on. And then he just came to my town, and he only lived 3 hours away, but we just met in person and then filmed a video together. So it was like before the 90-day fiance, whatever. I was like, walk up to the door. I'm like, I don't know if I'm getting fucking catfished. I have no idea what's going on. A little girl answers the door, and I'm like, hello? And I'm like, is this Justin's? Like, is he staying here? He goes, yeah, he's in the shower. I'm like, oh yeah, figures. He doesn't answer the door. You know how awkward that is? But, shout out to him. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, you meet a lot of connections, a lot of people that really need a spotlight too. I mean, I don't like to, like when you said interview, I was like, it's not an interview, it's conversation. Mostly because interview makes me feel like a whore with like a corporate microphone. But like, I like to just, talk and shoot the shit, which is fun because you get to learn a lot about people. You get to find out interesting information, and you get to meet some major connections too. And it brings me to some major questions that I want to know if you're for or against. One, are you for oregano on the crust of a pizza?
I've got nothing wrong with. I've got nothing against oregano on a crust of a pizza. I've actually incorporated oregano into my crust from scratch recipe, so I'm for it.
All right. Okay. Ketchup on the eggs.
Generally, I will not explicitly put ketchup on the eggs, but I will put ketchup on hash browns from time to time.
That's okay, but ketchup on eggs is disgusting.
But then sometimes, like if I'm having like over easy eggs or sunny side up eggs, I'll break the yolk and sort of mix it all together. And so it'll be sort of like an eggy hash brown ketchupy mixture. And so there will be ketchup that touches the eggs, but it's like explicitly putting ketchup. If I'm just having scrambled eggs, I'm not putting ketchup on scrambled eggs.
You're walking the line, Johnny Cat. You're walking
That's
the
right.
line. Okay.
Just up to the edge, but I'm on the right side of the ketchup, no ketchup debate.
Are you for or against the crust of the pizza though when you order a pizza? Like a lot of people leave it still in the box, and I see that as a mental health issue because it's like you already ate most of the bread. You're just leaving the bread by itself without any sauce on there.
So as a someone who lives just outside of the Chicagoland area, we are well known for our Chicago deep dish pizza, and the crust is one of the better parts of the pizza. So I'm definitely for eating the crust.
That leads into an even bigger question. Do you consider that a pizza?
Yes, I do. And
really? It's
yes.
A lasagna or calzone. I've talked to so many pizzaiolos that are all like, it's a freaking calzone because it's in a pan.
It's definitely not a calzone. A calzone is a fully encrust, pizza-like, food product. There's no crust on the top of a deep dish pizza. And if there is, you're doing it wrong.
I can send a message to Uni and they will send you a message saying it is a lasagna.
There's no crust on a lasagna.
I just don't trust something you got to make in a pan. It's more like a lasagna. Like I like the classic slice. You grab it that way. Like even if it's if it's a square and it's cut up into it's thin, paper thin. That to me is not even a pizza. That's like I don't even know. That's like.
So I'm gonna have to disagree with you because I'm in favor of all pizzas, whether it's a New York style, whether it's a thin crust. We've got good thin crust in the Chicagoland area. Lou Malnati's is one of the better known pizza establishments in this region of the country, and they've got a great thin crust. They've got a great. I mean, they're best known for their deep dish. And it's definitely pizza. It comes in a pizza box. It looks like a pizza, smells like a pizza, tastes like a pizza. It's a little thicker than a regular pizza. Contrary to popular belief, you don't need to use a fork. You don't need to use a knife with it. You can if you.
You're sounding like I had a guest on, Jerry, the Portland pizza peddler, and he's from Chicago originally, but lives out in Oregon. But he's talking like this when we started going into it. I was like, no. But he admitted to it though, because it is kind of a lasagna. But the thing is, do you think you should have to eat pizza with a fork? Like a lot of times people eat pizza with a fork and stuff, even though that's the classic traditional way. It's just not the way we've done it.
I don't think you should eat it with a fork. I'm not a purist. For example, as a sort of Chicago sort of centric individual, I'll put ketchup on a hot dog, and there's definitely folks from Chicago who say that's a cardinal sin and mustard only. So I'm not a purist when it comes to it. If you want to use a fork, it's your pizza. Go ahead and enjoy it the way that you want. I'm against somebody forcing me to try to use a fork if I don't want to use a fork. But it's food. Enjoy it the way that you want to enjoy it.
Okay. Now I'm gonna shoot another one at you, then you guys
All
shoot
right.
me one over here because I'm running out of ideas.
Sounds
But
good.
for or against macaroni and cheese?
Oh, definitely for macaroni and cheese. Now, on the topic, just to loop this back here, there's a pizza place in Madison, Wisconsin. So we're a state up, on top of us here, and they're known for serving bizarre ingredients and toppings on their pizzas. And one of the toppings that they put on their pizzas is macaroni and cheese. And so,
Wow.
I was not that for that. I was against that for sure. But macaroni and cheese by itself, absolutely. Especially I've got a young kid. He's 15 months old. And throwing a little box of mac and cheese together is a quick way to satiate his hunger needs.
$1 chicken sandwiches from Dollar Tree is how I was raised. That was the easiest way to toss $10 out, and you were fed for like a week and a half.
Wait, hold on. Chicken sandwiches from Dollar Tree?
Dude, don't freaking. You got to be for these things, man. They're
I
amazing.
didn't even know that they served.
It's a Dollar Tree brand, but you can get it at Food Lion, but it's even more expensive. But Dollar Tree sells them. They're the regular size of like a McDonald's chicken sandwich, but they're
Is it refrigerated?
Yeah, you put it in the freezer.
Okay. I didn't know that Dollar Tree had a freezer section.
They have they do. They have.
That might be an East Coast thing. I don't know if we have that here in the Midwest.
Have chicken sandwiches. They have the biscuits for breakfast. The breakfast biscuits. Don't get those because the cheese does not come out well in the microwave. They have a spicy chicken sandwich.
Imagine.
Then they did healthy, and they made a grilled chicken sandwich. And then now they got like either the cheeseburgers, the sliders, and stuff. I'm like, this is perfect. You walk in like Dollar Tree with like $20, and you feel like a king, just stacking everything off the shelf. But it also brings up a good point. You said macaroni and cheese on a pizza. What do you feel about dessert on a pizza? Because I'm against Nutella on a pizza with banana on it. I had encountered that in my life, and that is death.
Is that like a cookie crust and like it's a dessert that looks like a pizza, or it's like it's pizza, a regular pizza and then there's just dessert on it?
Yeah, it's like no pizza sauce, just Nutella and then banana, but it's the regular crust. There's no cookie crust.
I'm against that. Yeah, I don't think. I think you're crossing some lines that deserve to be, separate, courses within the meal. It doesn't need to be one course. You can just have your meal and then you can have your dessert. So I'm going to throw it back to you now. Okay. So one of the topics that has been fairly controversial in the history of our show is adults who drink milk.
Okay. That's a big one for me.
Let's hear it.
Because I commented on your Instagram and you said, what about Oreos? And I wasn't thinking about Oreos, but here's the thing. Depends on the type of Oreo, because then you go into a deeper classification because there's some of them like wasabi flavored, cinnamon flavored. I would not want that in my milk because I think the best part, like for cereal, for instance, I eat all my cereal dry. I'm lactose sensitive. So okay. I don't drink a lot of milk anymore. So I'm kind of against the milk thing.
What about milk substitutes? Like an almond milk or a oat milk?
I mean, I get it, but then it's like, are we playing God? Because I don't know if any of these things have tits that they actually get milk out of. You know what I mean?
It's really more like an almond juice or an oat juice, but like oat juice doesn't really sound so good. That sounds like maybe like a disease, like now, a street name for a disease.
If we're talking about just milk by itself, it depends on what you're doing. Like,
so I think what we're talking about here is like two ways that you could parse this. Let's just say you're at a restaurant, okay, and just a generic restaurant, could be a Bennigan's, TGI Fridays, something that is relatable nationwide, and you order whatever you order. Maybe you get a little potato skin sampler, and then you get a cheeseburger,
bacon potato skins.
Yeah, you get those, and then the waiter or waitress says, "What would you like to drink?" And you say, "I'd like a glass of milk." Are you for or against?
You're a fucking psychopath. If I was the waitress, I'd be like, "What did you just say to me? Are you 5 years old?"
I'll be right back. You call the FBI.
Oh, God.
Yeah. All right. So I think most of us felt that way, but Some of
It's
our
just,
listeners
you gotta,
strongly disagreed.
if you see an adult man drinking milk out in public, it's really, really strange. You're like, what is happening right now? Like, I know people drink it before to go to bed, like to help them sleep. It honestly doesn't do much. But like, if you're ordering that as your beverage at a restaurant, you need to check the people you're hanging out with.
All right. Let's see now. I want to go on to another topic here. What do you think about, are you familiar with ASMR, the category of content that's semi-popular on YouTube?
It's what this podcast would have been if I didn't end up doing this. It was supposed to be me eating different brands of cereal dry into the microphone, but then I like get like a Raisin Bran chunk in my throat and I would cough. So you would hear the like that on there. And then that would just be your listening pleasure because those people get millions of hits.
Yeah, I don't, but so let's look at this two ways. One way, so there's the being an ASMR content creator, but then there's also the consuming ASMR content.
Would I
So,
listen to it?
so
No.
okay, but you would be a content creator in that category.
I found it funny and entertaining when I was listening to one. I was like, I could easily do this. But then I'm also come from a family where if you chewed with your mouth open or like a cow, you got slapped in the head, you got yelled at and all that. So that just, whenever I hear it, I'm like, are you freaking serious?
So I'm glad you brought this up. So you said that, oh, I could do that. But then you chose not to, and you chose to do something different, which was having conversations. And I've, listened to a couple of your episodes. It sounds like you've connected with people in the UK, in Australia, other parts of the United States. Is this something that just sort of inherently or innately brings you some sort of joy and satisfaction?
Yeah, it's definitely is not something I'm choosing to do for a career. I think if you're doing podcasting to be a career, sorry for anybody, I'm not trying to crush hopes and dreams, but it's probably not going to happen. Mostly because everybody that is making money off podcasts is like super famous already, and then they just started one. This is more like just like a passion project, the thing that I love to do. I mean, I've met so many amazing people. Be like you said, being involved in the hot sauce community, pizzaiolo community, just all these people. I mean, you run into some weird stuff. You end up finding like people think that, oh, I'm only getting interesting guests or something. I'm like, I'm asking everybody because we're all interested. We just gotta, it's about sorting that out and figure out how do I get that information out of you.
Yeah, I think that's like something that we thought a lot about. Or actually, we didn't really think a lot about creating this podcast. I basically sent a text out to my friends like, "Hey, you guys want to bring the show back?" And they're like, "Yeah, okay, sure." I'm like, "All right, I'll set it up." But then we just did it. And so there's sort of like two things that are going on in terms of like our show, and I think maybe what's going on with your show as well is that if you're going to engage in some sort of creative endeavor, it should really be something that you enjoy doing, or there should be some aspect about it, some aspect of it that brings you intrinsic value. And so like for me doing this show, it's a way for me to connect with some of my best friends from high school who, now that we all live in different parts of the country, we get to actually see each other, albeit remotely, via Zoom. But we get to like work on a project. So there's like something about having a common goal. I know like when I was in college, I played on a lacrosse team. It was a club lacrosse team, nothing too special, but it brought together a bunch of, guys that, probably otherwise wouldn't have been friends, but we had this common goal of working together and being on a team and, trying to, do better than we did the previous season. And so having a common goal, I think is something that a lot of people don't necessarily have with their core group of friends. But I think podcasting is unique because it doesn't really require any special equipment. Like you can get like nicer headphones and a nicer microphone. Looks like you've got a nice pop filter. Looks like you might have some
This is $10
soundproofing
off
in the back.
Amazon. All of this equipment is like $10 off Amazon. I told people like I used to do them on my phone. Then I bought a
Right.
$100 Zoom recorder. I was like, it just depends on how far you want to get into it. But like
But
we're
you can
talking
start
about,
with the equipment that you have. Like you need a pair of earbuds to get like good quality audio.
yeah,
Not great, but like a good enough quality audio. I don't know how are you hosting your podcast? Are you
I just
using?
Anchor's free.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
I tell people like when you're talking about getting together with your friends and then it became like a fun thing in a group activity. The weird thing is that's the idea at first, and then it shifts into something even crazier, which is like, whoa, we got a listener. We got to create content, and then it's like now you guys are like we have to get together to do this. And then once you guys get together, you're having so much fun, and it's just this thing that keeps you all connected too. Because much like you're saying, I mean, same thing when you get out of high school, you think all these people, you're going to see them every single day. You're going to be hanging out with your friends all the time. I don't go to my friend's house at all. And I haven't, like, we talk on Snapchat. Social media is the thing. And this just brings up a good one. Are you for or against social media? Because I consider it helpful in the way, if you're trying to grow a business, if you're trying to, start something like a company or maybe even a podcast, but I consider it, I'm very against in being on it 24/7. Like, I get people that send me messages 24/7, just constantly, like, hi, all this type of stuff. That's cool, but I like the real communication, and through doing Zoom or something, that is just as real as it's gonna get, because I don't live near you. But, like, I mean, I just prefer the actual interaction, that vibe, that energy, and you can't get that through social media.
Yeah, I think I feel somewhat fortunate. I guess I fall into the like elder millennial generation, which is a classification that I might have just made up. But being 35, I grew up at a time where I remember a world that did not have widespread consumer-facing internet. We were like really excited when my dad's work computer, had a modem and we could connect through the phone, and we had to go through like the 5-minute login process, and it took like literally 30 seconds to like download an image. And so I sort of got to see the entire evolution of what we now know to be the internet, and social media is clearly an important part of that. So I think that I have a perspective that maybe the younger millennials and Gen Z crowd don't necessarily have, where it's just been this ubiquitous part of your life. That as a high school teacher, I see this all the time. Students just constantly on their phones, and I think overall I'm for social media. I think that it serves a good purpose, but I don't think currently society is doing a good job of educating students what role social media can serve, and how it can be a useful tool, but how it can also be something that can totally derail you and consume you, and sort of interrupt sort of sane rational thinking. Everybody probably has like an uncle or an aunt or some family member that's just like constantly posting political content on Facebook or Twitter or wherever it may be. And I don't think that's helping anything. It's just sort of reinforcing this echo chamber that they're already in, regardless of the side. It helps. It does the opposite of help. It just sort of makes you think that your own opinions are the correct only opinion, and the algorithms of many of these social media applications are sort of like trained to feed you the information that you agree with, or that you adamantly disagree with, so that you can either be enthusiastically for your side, or energetically and enthusiastically against the opposition. And so both for young people and then also people who are late to the game. And so some of the baby boomer crowd that didn't really go through the evolution, sort of like skipped that middle phase of AOL Instant Messenger and sort of like the Web 1.0 era, and just sort of jumped into technology with social media. I think it can be a sort of corrosive, have a corrosive effect on people's thinking. But if you can appreciate the role that it serves and then contextualize it there, I think it's a very powerful tool, especially when it comes to business or trying to grow a podcast, or trying to connect with people
But we're
for any number of
people, and
reasons.
we don't use it in a very beneficial way. Most of us try and use it for like dumb, stupid memes or something. It's the thing with social media. If you look on Twitter, it's not exactly very nice, I would say. There's a lot of hate and a lot of just people just lashing out, because what's really weird about Twitter is it gives you instant contact to people that you probably should not have contact with. Like, you can handle the problems of your family, but you can't handle the problems of your world. Next thing you know, you're getting trending things about coronavirus and all this other type of stuff, and then you're just getting pissed off at people. I'm like, okay, so are you for or against masks? That's a deep one.
I'm for them. I think that our scientific community is suggesting that we wear them. I don't think that it's a huge infringement on my civil liberties. Then also I think that whether or not you want to have the conversation about whether it's your right to wear one or not, I think that we should be thinking about what is our responsibility to our fellow man, regardless of politics. If it could help prevent the spread of coronavirus in this case, then I think that it's probably a good idea to wear one.
I'm in like the middle. I just think that like you can wear one if you feel comfortable, but I don't think people should be forced to if they don't want to wear one. Only because like you're not gonna like if you're wearing a mask and you're worried about it, then you're okay because you're not gonna get what they have. You know what I mean? But I've just seen too much in my town. Like our numbers have gone incredibly high up, but like business owners are having to close permanently because we're a tourist town, so we get a bunch of tourism here, and then these people that don't live here are calling the cops on them for not following social distancing, if they're not 6 feet apart, if they're not doing this. And next thing you know, they get shut down. And then like now our whole town, like half of it's shut down still. We're not on a lockdown or anything. It's just businesses had to close because they don't want to open because everything's just a threat. There's people calling and screaming and calling the cops. I'm like, if you're that worried about it, stay home. I actually saw a sign on the door of I forgot what the name of it. It's like some bagel shop. Oh my God. I really wanted to give them a shout out too, because they have the oatmeal raisin bagel that is to die for. But like it was like if you're one of these quarantine or coronavirus like whatever, it was like then stay quarantined. And I was like, that makes sense because their kitchen is so small that like it's right next to the counter. So there is not a 6 foot distance. And like there was a 90-year-old man that works there, and there was a picture put on Instagram, and he was like covering 150-degree whatever next to an oven, and then it's 100 degrees outside. And he's sitting there trying to cook something, and he's trying to stay away too, but he's too close to the counter, and people called the cops on him because they weren't 6 feet apart. I was like, the whole building, you just couldn't even walk in the kitchen or whatever. The whole building is like not even 7 feet.
I can respect people that are hesitant to endorse, their government telling them what they have to do, which again is why I sort of look at it as your responsibility as a citizen to take care of your fellow man. Don't put authoritative powers in a position where they have to tell you what to do. If everybody chose to wear them, then I think we'd be in a much better position. But at the same time, I also recognize that there are people that are, from a health standpoint, relatively fragile, and they don't necessarily have the option to stay at home. If you have to go out, you have. If somebody is choosing to not wear a mask and they're an asymptomatic carrier and they unknowingly spread a disease to you, if it could have been prevented by wearing 2 layers of cloth, it seems like not a terribly unreasonable thing to ask somebody to do, especially if it's in a public place or a place of business.
Are you for or against card, where they're making you pay for card everywhere?
I'm not sure what you said. Card?
Card, yeah, like bank card.
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Does that not happen where you're at right now?
If it is, I'm not. Maybe you can inform me. I don't know what it is.
It's becoming a new trend where now places are not doing cash anymore; they're only doing card.
Oh, okay. So like electronic transfer, so you don't have to.
Yeah, well, it's mostly like
cash.
They're saying that cash can spread coronavirus from hand to hand and everything, but it's also the fact of you're wearing a mask, and if you go to self-checkout can't tell who you are. So if you pay cash, you just walk out of the store if you took something. And I'm like, that's what I think it is. But like they have all your information. Like, I mean, I go to Walmart and I purchase something. Next thing you know, I'm getting an email from Walmart. I'm like, why? Because my email's linked to my card. So like there are people fighting right now about the fact that, oh, they want to use cash. It's their right to carry cash, which it is. But like now a lot of businesses are only accepting card because it's an easier way to just charge it straight to your car without even, I know so many people are like, you want that on your account? And then when we see that their account balance is above super high or something, we just charge them anyway. So without them even knowing. And then they get a receipt and a thing like, you guys charge me? Like, I didn't know.
I'm uninformed on this topic. I haven't really thought much about it. It seems reasonable for a private business to choose how they are accepting payments. I don't know what the legalities are about that. So I don't have a strong position either way. And I think I could see both sides of people who want to use cash and not have an electronic paper trail of their purchases, while at the same time I can understand businesses wanting to mitigate the potential transfer of the disease. So I'm going to split the difference on this one.
Okay, for or against the new Star Wars movies?
So in some of our episodes, we've talked about my failings as a movie watcher. I've never seen a Star Wars movie from start to finish in one sitting. Now, I've probably seen all of the footage of at least one or two Star Wars movies at different points in my 35 years. And so together, I've probably seen at least one Star Wars movie in its totality, but never in sequence in one sitting. So the new Star Wars
I
movies.
have not seen the new ones. I'm with you
Okay.
on the old ones. That's where I've watched them. But I'm with you on the fact of what you experienced with Star Wars is what I experienced with the Matrix. I've only
Okay.
seen bits and pieces of each and every single one. So like, I remember falling asleep and waking up. I'm like, this movie's still freaking on, and like, so every time I watch the Matrix, I just get anxiety. I'm like, this movie feels like it's 20 days long or something.
Yeah, the Matrix movies came out about the time I was in high school and college, and I think that they were pretty big amongst my friends. I've seen the whole Matrix series in sequence in single sittings, and so I'm for the Matrix series. I think you should carve out some time to give it a go.
It's too much of a mind screw. And then like I know so many people that are like, it's exactly we're all in a simulation right now. I'm like, I don't think I can dive down this rabbit hole, because then next thing I know, if like you ever watch something so much, you end up figuring out like, is this what's really happening? Like you feel like you're starting to break through the surface or whatever reality a little bit. Like you start getting mind screwed. I've just heard too many drug stories and people talking about taking DMT and then the universe starts falling apart. And I'm like, I don't think I can go down that rabbit hole. I don't think I can ever try major drugs, because I know I'll just lose my freaking mind.
I don't have any experience in that realm, but on the topic of are we living in a simulation, I think it's entirely plausible that we could be. But if that's the case, it's such a good simulation that I don't know if it really matters.
Is that what deja vu is? The fact that the simulation like glitches and then it repeats?
It's possible. I don't know if you're familiar. When you were a child, did you have? And so I'm going to intentionally not say the title of the books, and it'll come clear why.
Dr. Seuss.
But another franchise of books that involved bears and a family of bears.
Yeah, I know the book. Can I say the name?
Yes.
The Bernstein Bears.
Okay. So say it again.
It's the Bernstein Bears, right? Or Berenstein Bears, whatever it's called.
Okay. So most people know it as the Berenstein Bears, but if you go and if you look at the cover art of any of the books, or if you just do a Google search, it's actually the Berenstain Bears with an A. And so this is another example of one of those deja vu glitch in the matrix scenarios.
It's the Mandela
Sometimes
effect.
also referred to as the Mandela effect,
It's the
where
same thing with C-3PO in Star Wars. People, the toys, everything remembers him as all gold, but actually in the
he's got the
movie,
silver leg.
yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
people don't
I
know that one.
watched a BuzzFeed or looked at a BuzzFeed article on this, but yeah. So are you for or against referring to that series of children's books as the Berenstain Bears? Or are you going to stick with Berenstain?
I go back and forth honestly, because like what you were saying about it's being a different thing. It's kind of Mandela effect. I never actually fully learned the thing, so I call it Berenstein. I'll call it Berenstein. I'll call it whatever, just because I never actually learned the full thing. It's like when in school they started teaching cursive and then they stopped at the letter Z and then they never finished it. So now I don't know how to do cursive, and now they just don't even teach it in school anymore.
They stopped at the letter C or Z?
Z.
Z.
The
What
last
are the
one of the
letters you want to
freaking
know?
alphabet. I want to know how to properly do them all. You can't just teach me the whole thing and then go to Z and then stop. I'm like, now what happens if I come across a word like zebra? How am I going to fucking do that one?
I don't know if I'm following you, because if you made it all the way to Z, didn't you get all of the letters between A
It's
and
like
Z?
when I say A and then I go,
Yeah.
it means apple. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they focused on it. Then they went all the way down to Z and stopped. They didn't actually sit there and practice every single thing out. So when I try and draw it, it looks like I'm 5 years old with the crayon in the wrong hand, where I'm like scribbling. They're
So
like,
you can do each letter individually, but you can't sequence them together.
yes.
That is a problem. Well, I don't think cursive is
If you're
something that.
signing your paycheck, it is pretty important.
Yeah,
That's
I
where it
mean,
shines. The woman at
yeah.
the bank was like, what the fuck is this? I was like, what? That's my signature. She's like, I can't even read this.
Just make the first letter clear and then scribble the rest. That's what I do. I've got a clear M on Michael, a clear M on Macfadden. Everything else is just sort of an ambiguous scribble.
Okay. Are you for or against? And I saw this on your Instagram post. I'm going to shout out to that meatloaf.
So I'm for meatloaf. That was in my story last night. I did a poll, and that was meatloaf that I made. So that was meatloaf I made last night. I had it for lunch today as a meatloaf sandwich. That comes from Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Body. Actually, no, it's the 4 Hour Cookbook or for whatever the last one in the 4 Hour series, and it's a slow carb compliant meatloaf recipe. It had stuffed with goat cheese and spinach, topped with tomato paste.
Lost me at the goat
Don't knock
cheese,
it till you've
but
tried. It's
I like.
pretty good.
Do you like it soft though, or do you like it crispy? I like a nice, like kind of like crusty, little bit of a meatloaf. I would say like a little bit of a
Yeah, a little
crunch to
crust
it.
on the outside isn't bad. I think if it's crusty all the way through, you've probably gone too far in your
Sometimes I like
cooking.
it, like I leave a burger on a little bit past when it's supposed to where it comes out like a charcoal brick. I like that.
You're in favor of the well done burger.
I am. I can't do it raw though. Like the whole factor is like with the people that want it like bloody, where like you're at a
Yeah,
steak restaurant and the whole place just covered, looks like they're like having like crab soup or something. Like, I don't want that.
yeah. I've never really understood the folks that are going for like the full on still breathing, cut of meat. I'd like it to be cooked. I think like medium well for a burger, medium for a nice steak. If it's a lesser cut of steak, maybe medium well. But that's how I go with my meat. So I wanted to ask you a question now. I want to go on to did you try any other creative endeavors prior to launching this podcast? Did you try
Are you
maybe like a
looking for
YouTube
insightful
channel?
tips for a podcast? Because I'm about to say I'm the last person you probably want to ask for tips. I'm not
I'm
barely
curious.
managing myself.
I'm curious, just more about creative process than anything else, because I've sort of it took me a long time to sort of come up with like a description of how I think of myself. Like, when I'm thinking about like, what is my identity? Um, like what is it that I am? Because I've dabbled in a lot of different things, like web design, WordPress development, some video game design, a lot of Photoshop graphic design stuff, some video production, some like analog things like furniture building. So I've always been like into making and building. I had a small business, or have a small business, selling handkerchiefs, AmericanHandkerchief.com. So like I've been really interested in like doing, making, building, and creating. And so I'm just sort of curious, was this podcast like the first thing that you tried and it worked, or were you dabbling in other things? I know the ASMR thing was something that you thought about for a minute, but
Yeah,
have you dabbled in any other creative endeavors?
this is the original, and then I used to do a spin-off podcast called Fill in the Blank, where it was focused on specific topics. I would ask my friends, because I used to do the first 90 of these in person, and then I started figuring out the utilization of Zoom. And then, fill in the blank was more like fun topics my buddies wanted to talk about. Like, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, we go get Slurpees at 7-Eleven. They're like, why don't we focus on the specific topic of Slurpees? What's the history behind it? Next thing you know, we're talking about Slurpees for like 35 minutes, and it ends up going into this huge debate. Like, for instance, my cousin, on one we did called Death by Coconut, which was there's actually signs in Hawaii that warn you about falling coconuts and you can die from them. And we're reading articles about people that passed away. Dude, a guy was sitting in a lawn chair, leaned back, and you know how that metal pole in the back of the chair, he had his neck on it, so it like creased his neck like that. And the coconut hit him going like 60 something miles an hour, and they like weigh up to 5 pounds, snapped his neck completely. And I was mentioning that on the episode, but like then we ended up getting into an argument about which is better, Star Wars or Star Trek, in the 45-minute episode. And I'm like, I win. Star Wars is better. And like, how? I had two people going against me. I was like, cause it's 2 o'clock in the morning and both of you assholes are wearing sunglasses. I'm like, it's like, you know what I mean? But like, it was fun experiences like that. But like, I ended up stopped doing that one when I started posting this one every single day. At that point, I was like, I don't think I can run two. And even though right now I'm running three, so it's like,
So you doing a podcast, a conversation every single day?
yeah, I post every single day. That's why I'm
Very
almost at
cool.
500.
Now, are you doing just as a podcast? Or are you taking the video from the Zoom calls and posting that to YouTube also?
That goes on YouTube. Yeah.
Very cool.
So
Are you
everybody's going to
doing?
see your beautiful face.
Oh, all right. Should have known. Do you then do anything in terms of like marketing? Do you pull out clips from your episodes and release those to your Instagram, or
I
do you
usually
do
just do
any?
like a funny story thing. I think a lot of it, like for me, like not really good at promoting. Like if you ever hear me on an episode of somebody else's podcast, I'm just like, it's just Google the name. Like I'm not going to tell you where you can find it at. Honestly, if you're too lazy to find it. I mean, it depends. Like for your show, for instance, you guys got a really good thing. So if you wanted my advice on it, would be like, you said something about finding like a character and building something up. Now, you can easily go as you can call yourself, you know, Mike McMickerson, and then you could be like this funny, you could have this comedic style type thing to it, or you can actually be yourself and keep that original vibe, that authentic thing that you and your friends have together, which makes it more fun, not like everybody's playing a character. And then you just find out where you want to go with that. Do you want to, focus on specific topics, things? Honestly, it depends on who you were trying to narrow your audience down to.
Yeah, one of the things that I think we've been thinking about or struggling is I know that you had some of the. Can you hear me now? I think you got muted now.
That was weird.
Yeah. All right. I think we're back. I think when I was listening to like your hot sauce podcast, I think that's your episode where you were interviewing. I think it was an Australian guy who's into the hot sauce
Conversation
world. Your conversation with the sauce guy, not an interview. I don't know what the hell I was thinking. So like there, it's really easy to like find your niche audience because it's like obviously it's people who are interested in hot sauce. For or against is such a blanket topic that I think it's going to be hard for us to build an audience. But again, that sort of goes back to the idea of like, why are we doing this? It's really more to do because it's sort of fun. And so we're trying to find like what is the minimal effective dose of work that we have to do in order to create something that we are like pleased with putting out into the world that doesn't take a whole lot of time. The good thing about a podcast is you basically hit record and it's almost done. Like I throw it into Audition and then I clean up the audio a little bit and I throw in our intro and our outro music at the end. And if I'm doing like we do interviews, they're not conversations, but if we do an interview in our show, I'll put a sound effect to sort of signal that we're switching between parts of the show. But like the post-production, it's less than a half an hour of work. And so I think, one of the things that we're trying to do is, find something that is engaging for us. Like the idea of taking on a persona. I could definitely appreciate, like comedic types who would want to do that. Like, Larry the Cable Guy made an entire career out of being Larry the Cable Guy. I think his name's like Dan White or something. But that's definitely not what I want to do. Like, so what we're trying to do is what is something that like feels authentic, that's genuinely us. I think when you listen to our podcast, it sounds like 4 friends, or sometimes we have 5 or 6 friends on, just sort of like, hanging out and having a good time. And I think it comes off as authentic because like we actually are old friends who, go back, some of us go back, over 30 years. Like,
Well,
Patrick Lothian, like
the main question is, are you for or against fun? Or do you want to have fun when you do it? Or do you want to turn it into a job? I've seen so many people, like, I mean, there are days like, with posting every day, it's not easy. With, editing, I do a little bit of editing when it comes to just the audio only. If like a microphone goes off or like somebody's like, I usually only edit when someone has like severe anxiety or they stutter a lot and they're like very nervous. I'm like, hey, it's not live. I'm not going to make you look bad. I'll cut it down and I'll do whatever to make sure it flows naturally. I've turned a 2-hour conversation into a 45-minute one, just because of the amount of pauses. It's just honest, genuine chat. I won't talk to you if you're using a fake stage name or something. I always need your actual name because it's like, the whole thing. It's like being for or against. The factor is, if you're going under a character name, you're going to say some outrageous shit that you wouldn't normally say. So it's like, now
it definitely would give you the freedom to go ahead and be outlandish with maybe less, risk of getting canceled down the line, especially if you're intentionally being a character. Like, Stephen Colbert, before he had the Colbert Show, when he was on the Daily Show and when he had the Colbert Show on Comedy Central, he was, an exaggerated version of a rightward leaning, pundit. But like, that's not who he actually, was as a person, but it gave him the freedom to play in that zone. I'm not a character, like I couldn't hold a character long enough. I would break a character like almost immediately, and then it just like wouldn't work, and it would just like fall flat. And then people would be confused, like, is he being who is he trying to be right here? So I think just trying to be myself with my good friends is sort of the way that we're going. Then on the topic of what you said is like, do you want this to be a job or do you want it to be fun? I think anyone who creates a podcast, like they're putting something out into the public. And so I would be willing to bet that most podcasters, if given the choice of having, their 10 to 50 listeners or having like thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of listeners, would choose the latter, because once you have that sort of audience, you can turn it into a revenue generating, entity, and it could potentially give you the freedom to take it in any direction that you want. And so I think most people, if they're getting into podcasting, they should do it just because it's like fun. For me, it's like, it's a learning exercise. Like, what can I take from podcasting that I could then bring into my real job as a classroom teacher? So like, I have a second podcast channel that I use specifically for my students. And so like, if I have a reading assignment, sometimes I will read it and then release it as a podcast. And then the homework assignment will be, hey, go on a walk and listen to this podcast, come back and answer this reflection question. Or if you don't, consume information well that way, then just read it and then do it. So trying to differentiate my instruction by using these technologies. I think one of the reasons that I it sort of dabble in all of these creative endeavors is it creates this cross-pollination where like, oh, I learned this thing in podcasting that now I can use in my teaching, or I learned this technique in graphic design that I can incorporate into my video game design, or I learned this, tool of like for us. So I'll give you one final example here in terms of like cross pollination. I used to do WordPress development, so like sort of mostly front end software development, like front end web applications. And I needed some functionality that like I probably could have figured out, but like I just don't have the JavaScript and PHP chops to like hammer it out. But I knew exactly what it needed to do, and I knew exactly like what I knew that it would be very easy for somebody who was like very skilled in that domain to do it. And so I went on to Fiverr and I found a software developer who did this. Probably took him 10 minutes and it cost me $30. And so I was like, great. That was like a great way to, just throw a little bit of money at this problem. And then I got the benefit of the WordPress plugin that I needed for this specific project. So when we were working in our podcast, like we wanted to have a cool theme song. And so I was like, okay, how can I cross-pollinate what I know to get that? And so I went back to Fiverr and found out that there's a bunch of rappers on Fiverr that will do theme songs for like, I think it was $15. And we got this like awesome rap from this UK-based rapper named Husty. And so now we have this awesome rap for the intro and outro of our podcast. And so, when it comes to podcasting, it's like have some goals in mind that are not like making money. If you're doing it just for making money, it's probably not going to work. But then at the same time, like have that in mind as like an avenue that could work. Like don't preclude yourself from that not working.
I'm for creativity, anybody's creativity, whether it's, taping a banana to a wall to whatever it is, you want to do a sophisticated painting, sure. But when it gets bad is when you go from creativity to competition. And with something like media, when it comes to podcasts, you're going to notice that this place is a giant competition thing. If you look at the hashtag podcast, it's just people like, if you like a photo or something, they'll follow all your followers, then unfollow them when they get followed back. It's just a way of building up. I know so many people that just follow me just to follow every single person I post. That's cool and all because they obviously want to get out there, but it's like clawing at the top. It's like Wall Street. You're going to step on the person's throat beside you to call up to the top, send a messages, you would like mine better, all these types of things. I'm just like, fuck it. People will find it when they find it. I like having conversations. I met some amazing people that I still talk to every single day that have been on hundreds and hundreds of episodes ago. I remember every conversation. But when it comes to like, if you look at small group communities like the hot sauce community, they're becoming bigger now to the point where now it's starting to you'll have the egotistical hot sauce people. I can handle twice the spicy stuff you can. It's always like, it's like finding like you create something, bunch of people like it, and then one person comments, yeah, but you could have did it better this way. It's like, here's some tips. It's like, why, what's with the ego? Like everybody's got this huge ego issue. And I'm like, good God, like
I'll challenge you a little bit. I'm going to challenge you or push you a little bit on this. I agree that ego is often a bad thing. But I don't know necessarily if competition is a bad thing. So like, for example, if there's two hot sauce podcasts and somebody has a nice like Blue Yeti microphone and the audio is crisp and clean, and then somebody, is recording outside where there's a dog barking and, it's really windy, like you can't hear it. Like you're going to, as the listener, compare the two. And so in essence, there's going to be this sort of like subconscious competition going on. You're probably going to listen to the one that has the better audio quality, which is going to force the individual who might have better content but poor audio quality to up their game a little bit. And so I think the consumer ends up benefiting when there is that competition. I agree, though, that if ego gets involved and you have somebody that's, tearing everybody else down just because they want to be, the big shot in the hot sauce podcasting community, then that's probably not a good thing. But what's cool about, podcasting is that it's not a fixed sum. It's this competition can be mutually beneficial. And so my podcast is going to gain more listeners by going on your podcast because your listeners are going to learn what I'm doing, and one or two or 100 or, whoever, they might start listening to my podcast. And then when I talk about my experience being on your podcast, some of our listeners are probably going to go and listen to this episode and
That's
some of your other
positive support,
episodes.
though. But what a lot of times is like you'll come across people like I invite hundreds and hundreds of people a day, basically just sending random invites. And it is weird when you get a random DM like, what is this? But like, I don't, obviously, if I'm only interested in something, I'm going to message out to the person. But when it comes to the concept of like everything, when it comes to this competition, a lot of times competition, and I do agree, it can be beneficial. But a lot of it is mostly just like people like, hey, you should check mine out. And then it's like, but like you'll start to notice those people. They only follow everything and then they'll never like anything. They'll never do anything. It's like, you're not really supporting me. You're just kind of using me to get you, your audience. Because I mean, like for someone like me that just comes in conversations with people from all over, there's going to be my audience is going to see yours, like, oh, I never do this. This is cool. And they're going to see it and they're going to follow it. But then there's like those types of people that just want to follow that you, and then as soon as you follow them back, they unfollow you, and they just want the views, they just want the follows, they just want to be more popularly known, they want to be this top thing. I'm like, just do it, follow whatever you're interested in. People will find it when it grows. You don't need
I
to
think
find
that's short-term behavior. If you're interested in one day being like a professional podcaster, if that being your thing, you should probably, I think like, stand-up comedians usually grind for about 10 years before they can, support themselves financially as a stand-up comedian. My hunch is that podcasting is probably pretty similar. But if you are capable of consistently putting out content that is authentic and provides some value to some, you're probably going to find an audience somewhere, especially if it's a niche topic. You're going to find your hot sauce community, and that guy that's burning bridges by poaching other people's followers, or using people for their own gain without giving anything in return. That community is going to realize that that guy or that gal is not really part of the community, and will sort of be weeded out in the medium term. Whereas that person that's like genuinely trying to do good, genuinely trying to put out good content, I think that there's a lot there that could then lead to the next thing. A friend of mine, Mark Hans, he's got a podcast. You probably enjoyed talking to him, called Thinking Differently. And he interviews, it's an interview podcast, sorry, in conversation.
well, if that's his, just for me, I just,
right.
I like I said, corporate.
But so like he interviews all sorts of interesting, entrepreneurs. And so like, here's another example. He was on our show. He was our first interviewee. And so now I'm talking about him to you. Maybe one day you'll reach out to him. And, I think it's a sort of like slow grind, where you just sort of do the next thing a little bit better. So that's what we've been doing. Is we haven't been aiming for perfection. We've been just trying to get things out the door and then listen, learn, sort of figure out what do we have to do to make it a little bit better. Mark recently got his first sponsor, and it wasn't like something it wasn't Casper mattress or Squarespace. It was like a local coffee producer. And so then like his deal with her is that like she's sending him free coffee, and he's doing an ad read, and he's got they set up a domain with whatever the coffee company name / mark. So they're sort of keeping track of any ads or any purchases that are coming in from his recommendation. And so it's like that's like step number one. Doesn't really sound like a whole lot, but now he's got that one experience under his belt. It's all about sort of like building
You
momentum
gotta
and
walk
building
before you can
momentum.
run.
Yeah, exactly. And I think anybody that is in that short-term behavior of trying to poach people's followers or do these, things that don't feel good, they're probably not in it for the long run and probably won't end up being successful, because that's the thing that is driving them. Whereas the people that are trying to just do something for the sake of doing it, while keeping an eye on sort of like the business side of things, not being blind to it, making decisions early on that sort of like pave the way to build that momentum until you reach that tipping point where, oh, all of a sudden we've got paying sponsors. And now, we can afford to put somebody on salary that can now help us build our social, that's going to help us build our listenership, that's going to help bring in more ad revenue, that's going to help us, hire somebody else or allow somebody else to leave their day job to go do this full time. So that's just sort of how I think about it. It's sort of about figuring out your priorities and then sort of going from there.
Yeah, I definitely think like if you need any like advice, I mean, I can point you to people if you want to guest. I always tell people like I'm pro people, I'm pro helping out. Mostly because like obviously we're all just trying to get a little something. We're all just trying to have a little fun. We're all just trying to make a little way in this world. So like obviously if you come across a guest of mine that I've had or something, I can reach out to them. I'll be more than happy to get them on your show.
I appreciate that.
I've talked to a few people, but before boring the listeners just with podcast analytics, because honestly it bores me a little bit, but the factor is I got two giant ones for you, two for or against.
Okay, and I think we're almost at an hour, so
yes,
we might have to wrap things out. I've got a hard out in the next 5 minutes.
That's what I'm saying. So are you pro the Zoom calls for school?
I think that every school district is going to have to consider the factors that are relevant to their community. So unfortunately, this is not a decision that has a blanket answer. If you cannot abide by social distancing protocols and there's a positivity rate that is above the CDC recommendations, it seems unwise to me to subject students and, by the transitive property, their parents, and then also the adults that are in the buildings. It seems unwise to subject them to the possibility of infection. So I think that sort of leaves you with the only option of some sort of remote instruction or a hybrid setting, but that's very challenging from a logistical standpoint.
I just look at like a disconnect in education when it comes to like you're not actually in the classroom, just because being at home, it's a little bit different. Like it's hard for me to learn a little bit when I'm in my house or something, like trying to read a book. I need to go to like a library or something.
Yeah, I don't know a single educator that thinks that Zoom is better than face-to-face, but you have to balance the consequences of what face-to-face would be. I don't think there's anybody that wants to be back in school more than teachers, from my experience professionally. But unfortunately, we're in weird times. So I think it's going to require a lot of different solutions. And then I also think that the world of education could borrow from the startup space and being lean and agile. And as things change, as we learn more, commit to doing what's best in the moment, given the data that you have.
So for or against, the last one would be the gene chip that they're talking about putting in the back of your head.
The gene chip?
It's like a tracking chip, but it also gives you the power of the internet. It's been an idea for like a few years now to put in the back of your head.
Is this Elon Musk's Neuralink?
Whatever it is, I don't care. It's the devil's worship.
I will defer to Elon Musk, who has a company called Neuralink, and he basically fears that artificial intelligence, general artificial intelligence, will eventually run the risk of destroying humanity, and not necessarily for malicious intent. For example, this is an extreme example that's somehow sometimes talked about in these discussions. Let's say that you had an artificial general intelligence and you wanted to point it at solving the problem of spam email. If you didn't have the correct parameters in place, the AI machine might determine that the best way to do that is to kill all of the humans so that nobody could write spam email
It's
anymore.
fucking Skynet, and it's called the Center for Existential Risk. We hired a bunch of government agents to work at this one place to make sure that Skynet doesn't happen. So I'm pro not doing the chip. I can't do it. I'm against the chip.
But here's the thing is Elon over at Neuralink believes that the only way to prevent this from happening is by becoming symbiotically entwined with the artificial intelligence. And so he's working on a mechanism to sort of connect to the human brain to decrease the bandwidth that is the speaking, like we do, or listening like we do.
Be Amish.
They're actually,
that's all you got to do. Just stay away from technology. It's evil.
Potentially. So that seems like we're either going to become cyborgs or Amish. And so I'm not sure which way is more appealing at this point.
As long as I can still enjoy I think that's all a nice chicken sandwich from Dollar Tree, I think I'll be okay.
I think you'll still be able to enjoy your Dollar Tree chicken sandwich.
I'm telling you, don't knock it before you try it, man.
I won't.
All right, Mike. Well, I appreciate you doing the podcast. I appreciate you doing the podcast, man. Why don't you go ahead and plug your show, dude?
All right. So For Against, it's available on all podcast platforms. You can also find us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at For Against Pod. That's just about it. So thanks so much for having me on the show. Enjoyed this conversation, and be sure to give you a shout out on our next episode.
And thank you for listening to this episode of the Blank Podcast.